There are seasons when praying feels natural. You sit down, you talk to God, and the words come easily. You know what you believe, you know what to ask for, and faith feels like something you can lean on without thinking about it too much. And then there are seasons when you sit down to pray and nothing comes out. You want to say something, but you don't know what to say. You don't know how to start. You might even feel uncomfortable just sitting there in quiet. If you're listening today and your faith feels quieter than it used to, not angry, not gone, but just different, I want to say this clearly from the start. That does not mean you've lost your faith. Loss has a way of changing how you show up with God. The prayers you used to pray don't always fit what you've been through. And sometimes it's not that you stop believing, it's that you don't know how to talk to God the same way anymore. You might still believe God is real. You might still believe He cares. You might still trust Him in general. But when it comes time to pray, you hesitate. You don't know what to ask for. You don't know what words to use. Or you pray and feel like nothing is happening. That can feel unsettling, especially if faith used to be something that felt steady and familiar to you. Today, we're not talking about how to fix that. We're talking about what it actually means when faith feels quiet after loss, and how staying connected doesn't always look like having the right words. Welcome to Highlight Your Healing. I'm Shannon Roan, grief coach and founder of J&J Journals. This podcast is for women navigating grief and learning how to heal with faith. Loss doesn't just affect your emotions. It affects how safe the world feels. It affects what you expect from life. It affects how much control you feel like you have over what happens next. And when those things change, faith often feels different too. Before loss, faith can feel straightforward. You pray, you trust, and life mostly makes sense. When something good happens, you thank God. When something hard happens, you believe things will work out. There's a rhythm to it. After loss, that rhythm can break. Something happened that you didn't expect. Something you may have prayed would not happen. Something changed your life in a way that you couldn't prepare for. And suddenly, the words you used to say don't feel honest anymore. You might find yourself thinking things like, I still believe in God. I just don't know how to talk to Him right now. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't even know what I'm asking for anymore. And that doesn't mean your faith is weak. It means your faith has been impacted by real life. A lot of people assume faith struggles only happen when someone stops believing. But more often, faith struggles happen when someone is still believing, but doesn't know how to hold that belief alongside what they've experienced. You might believe God is good, but you also know something painful happened. You might believe God is loving, but you're still sitting with unanswered questions. Holding both of those things at the same time can feel heavy. And instead of talking about that honestly, many people feel pressure to keep their faith looking the same as it did before the loss. But faith that hasn't been affected by loss is usually faith that hasn't had to stretch. Feeling unsure doesn't mean you've lost faith. It means your faith is being tested by reality, not theory. And one thing I want to slow down and name here is how confusing this can feel when you've always been someone who leaned on faith, especially if faith used to be your anchor. For some people, faith was the first place you went when something went wrong. You prayed, you trusted, you reminded yourself that God was in control. And most of the time, that framework worked. So when loss happens and that same framework doesn't bring comfort anymore, it can feel disorienting. You might think, why isn't this helping the way it used to? Or, why don't I feel the same peace everyone talks about? That can make you question yourself. It can make you wonder if something changed inside of you in a way that can't be fixed. But what often changes isn't your faith, it's the simplicity of it. Before loss, faith can feel clean and uncomplicated. But after loss, faith, it has to coexist with pain, disappointment, and uncertainty. And that requires a different kind of honesty. This is usually the moment when people start editing themselves with God. They stop saying what they really feel. They stop asking certain questions. They avoid certain prayers because they don't want to sound ungrateful or even unfaithful. But silence doesn't always mean distance. Sometimes silence is caution. Sometimes it's grief being careful with your words. If you've noticed yourself pulling back or struggling to pray the way that you used to, or even avoiding conversations about faith altogether, that's not a sign that you've failed. It's a sign that you're trying to protect something that still feels a little tender. And that tenderness deserves patience, not pressure. So I want to talk about the feeling that God is far away because this is something that many people experience, but they don't say it out loud. You may still go to church. You may still read scriptures. You may still pray, but it doesn't feel the same. You don't feel comforted in the way that you used to. You don't feel reassured. You don't feel much of anything. And that can be confusing. And for some people, it can be really scary. It can make you wonder, did I do something wrong? Did I lose my connection with God? And why does it feel like He's quiet when I need Him the most? What often gets missed in these conversations is the role grief plays in how we experience connection. Grief affects your body. It affects your nervous system. It affects your focus, your energy, and your emotions. And when you're overwhelmed, exhausted, or numb, it's harder to feel connected to anyone, and that includes God. Sometimes what we describe as distance from God is actually emotional overload. Your system is still processing loss, and there's only so much it can take in at once. There are seasons when faith doesn't look like confident prayers or long conversations with God. It looks like sitting quietly or repeating the same short sentence over and over, or just saying, I don't know what to say anymore. That still counts. Throughout Scripture, people speak to God honestly. They complain. They ask hard questions. They say things like, how long? And why? And where are you? And God does not turn away from them. He doesn't require perfect language. He doesn't require confidence. He doesn't require that you sound all put together. Faith is not measured by how inspired you feel. It's measured by whether you're still willing to show up, even when you don't feel like it at all. I also want to talk about how this shows up in everyday moments, because this isn't just something that happens during prayer or church. It can show up when someone says, God has a plan. And instead of feeling comforted, you feel irritated or even shut down. It can show up when you hear worship music and you feel nothing. Or when you just skip it all together because you don't have the energy to feel disappointed again. It can show up when someone asks you to pray for something and you hesitate because you don't know what you believe about prayer anymore. Or when you find yourself praying very differently than you used to. Maybe it's shorter prayers, fewer words, or very specific requests instead of those big declarations of faith. And these moments can make you feel like you're doing faith wrong. But they're actually very common responses to loss. Grief narrows your focus. It makes you practical. It makes you cautious. And sometimes it makes you honest in a way you've never been before. Instead of praying everything will be okay, you might find yourself praying, help me, God, get through this today. Instead of asking God to fix everything, you might just ask Him to stay. That shift doesn't mean your faith is shrinking. It often means it's becoming more grounded. There's also a difference between God being quiet and God being absent. quiet doesn't mean gone. Quiet means the relationship has entered a different phase. See, there are seasons when connection is built through conversation. And then there are seasons when connection is built through presence. If the only faith you allow yourself to have is faith that feels strong, confident, and reassuring, then the moment life gets hard, faith will feel inaccessible. But if you allow faith to be quiet, unsure, and still present, you give yourself room to keep showing up, even when you don't have clarity. And that kind of faith tends to last. One of the most common pressures people feel after loss is the pressure to feel close to God again. And if closeness is something you can force, as if faith is only real when it feels warm or reassuring, but relationships, they change through seasons, even the healthy ones. And your relationship with God is no different. Feeling distant does not mean you fail spiritually. It often means you're adjusting to a version of life you didn't choose. You don't have to force your closeness. You don't have to pretend that those prayers feel good. You don't even have to act like everything makes sense when it doesn't. God does not require you to feel close to Him in order for Him to be close to you. Sometimes staying connected looks like simply just not walking away. It looks like keeping the door open even if you're not talking much. It looks like honesty instead of performance. You're allowed to let your faith look different in this season. I want to pause here and speak directly to you who may feel embarrassed by this season of faith. The one who thinks, I should be stronger than this. The one who thinks, other people don't struggle like this. And the one who feels uncomfortable admitting that faith feels harder now. You are not the only one. Many people quietly carry this, especially in faith spaces where strength is praised and struggle is often misunderstood. It can feel safer to stay quiet than to admit that your faith feels different after loss. But different doesn't mean deficient. It means something real happened, something that mattered, something that changed you. Faith that hasn't been touched by grief often sounds confident. Faith that has been shaped by grief sounds careful, thoughtful, and even honest. And that honesty matters. Here's something simple you can reflect on this week. There's no pressure to journal or to come up with the right answer. I want you to ask yourself, what does my faith look like right now? Not what it used to look like, not what you think it should look like, just what it actually looks like today. Maybe it's quiet. Maybe it's uncertain. Maybe it's showing up even when you don't feel much. Maybe it's trusting one small truth instead of having answers for everything. Whatever the answer is, let it be honest. And I want to leave you with this. Faith does not disappear because it feels quiet. And God does not step back when you don't know what to say. Loss may have changed how your faith sounds, but it did not remove your connection to God. You don't need perfect words. You don't need strong feelings. And you don't need to rush yourself back into something that no longer fits the season you're in. Quiet faith is still faith. If something in today's episode resonated with you, consider following the podcast and leaving a review. It helps create a space for another woman to find these conversations when she needs them most. Your support truly matters. Thank you for listening, and remember to keep highlighting your healing.